Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to episode 3 of season 2 of ABN Talks. It's wonderful to have you here. And today I'm very, very excited to welcome a friend of mine onto the podcast, someone who's doing some very, very interesting stuff in Asia's beer scene. I'd like to introduce John Wei, who's the founder and Yeast Whisperer. Did I get that right, John? Yeast Whisperer?
Yeah, that's right.
Nice. I love the job title. John founded Brewlander, and for those of you who haven't heard of Brewlander, who've been maybe living under a rock in Southeast Asia, Brewlander is a Singaporean brewery. They aim to put ASEAN and Singapore on the global craft beer map. So, John, it's a real pleasure to have you on ABN Talks. Welcome. Where are you calling in from today?
I'm at home actually in Singapore right now. Yeah, I've been cutting back on a bit of travels. I would never have imagined myself to say that after the whole COVID lockdown for 2 years, right? To ever say like I'm a bit tired of traveling, but I am.
Yeah, no, and I think we've obviously we ran into each other in Ho Chi Minh City last month, which was great to catch up and survey what's going on. I definitely know the feeling. I think you said it yourself when we were last talking that the revenge travel is sort of over with now. Right now, I'm really happy. Same here. I'm at home in KL. I'm very happy to be not calling you from a hotel room, to be based at home and relaxing sleeping in my own bed. So John, I mean, tell us a bit about, I'm really curious for you to share with our guests. How did you get into craft beer and brewing? Like, where did the spark come from?
I think before even I share about that, right, I think I gotta share a little bit about how beer, right, itself, right, was something quite special, or how I grew to like beer in the first place, right? So I think for me, I've grown up in a very large family, right? My dad had like 9 other siblings, so it's a family of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, that's right, and many cousins, and mostly male dominated, right? Or majority are males. Like I've got many uncles, and even in my generation, right? Like my sister is the only female, so it's all cousins, all male cousins and all, right? So back when my grandparents was around, we used to do a lot of family gatherings, like every month almost, right? And like big occasions, we'll go out to celebrate. And as a young boy growing up, right, you see all the big boys, right? Like my uncle, my dad, my cousins who were at in your teenage years, right? They'll all be gathering about the table, post dinner, drinking beers and having drinks, right? And beer to me was always like, oh, you know what? I want to join the table, right? And here in Asia it's pretty common, right? Like they'll tease you, come have a sip of beer, have a sip of beer, And that was my introduction to beer, right? But for me it was like, oh, I want to grow up as quick as I can so I can sit down with them and like be part of that, the big boys club, and drink with them, right? So that really got me since a young age, like notice about, oh, I really want to get to that age of drinking beer. Then obviously in Singapore, right, we all have to do national service, right, where you are paid a really small sum of money as an allowance every month, right? And for us, like hardly any money on the weekends, but we'll make it a point to, hey, let's go out together, book out of camp and let's go somewhere, watch a game of football and just have a good time. And beer is the cheapest option for poor guys like us, doing national service, right? Like we would just order a cup of beer and just bond over it and sit there for hours just watching a football game, right? So that's how I really got into beer, and beer was my choice of drink growing up. And then bit of history is that I used to spend a bit of time in the UK in the 90s, where my dad had some business dealings there. So we would travel there many times a year, right? So even though I didn't study there, I would spend about maybe at least 3 months a year during all the school holidays traveling there. And obviously big beer culture there and all.
Absolutely, yeah.
There was this, there was this one moment where I was there in 2008, in a beautiful part of the UK, in Cornwall, right?
Love
And
Cornwall. Love Cornwall.
yeah. If you have not been there, you have to do it. It's
Absolutely
absolutely amazing. Yeah. And I walked into a dingy old pub, right? Like didn't think anything about it, right? It was dark, it was damp, it was pretty nasty in a sense, right? But it was just beside my bed and breakfast, right? So I walked in there, ordered a pint of beer, and wasn't thinking much of it, right? Because even up to that moment, I was like, oh, beer is beer, right? Because most beers here taste the same, commercial lagers, right? So I thought, okay, 4.2%, it's not gonna be much of a flavor going on, but I just want a pint of beer. And I had that pint of beer and I was like, oh my goodness, like it blew my mind off, right? And up to today, I still cannot remember that very moment where I had that, I call it the beer awakening moment, right? Like, oh my God, I didn't realize beer can taste so amazing, so much flavor in that. I could taste the malts, I could taste the freshness of the hops, and it was an ale, right? So it tasted very, very different to a lager. And I was like, oh my goodness, right? And I didn't know much about beer then, except that I enjoy drinking it. So, like the rest of the trip, right? Every time we walked past the pub, I was like telling my wife, hey, we gotta go in there, right? I just want to try a
Nice.
different pint, right? A different ale. And it got me really into this whole thing. So I came back to Singapore, I emailed the brewery, and it's the brewery is St. Austell's, right? And the beer is St. Austell's Tribute, one of my favorites up to this day.
It's a Cornish. It's a
It's a
Cornish. It's a Cornish brewery.
yeah,
Yep.
Cornish
Nice.
brewery in St. Austell's, right? And back in the day as well, you can only find it in that region in the southwest of the UK, right? Today they are massive in the UK. But like I was saying, I emailed St. Austell's and I asked, if they would ship beers to me in Singapore, and they'll say, oh no, it's too far, breakage, yada yada, right? So that didn't happen. But I stumbled into home brewing when I bumped into a friend I've not met for like 20 years actually, since primary school. So he left, he got himself, relocated to the US. He came back and we played a football game together, and he just randomly said, oh, in the US, many people make beers at home. Without knowing that I was suddenly in this whole beer awakening thing, right? And he just made a passing comment. And the next thing I knew was I went online and I Googled home brewing. What is home brewing, right? And then, long story short, I found out about Raymond and iBrew and Neil with the homebrew shop. I ordered my first homebrew kit, a Cooper's kit, right? And they
Nice.
send it over to my house. I made the first batch of beer, and then in the morning, I made it, and then in the afternoon we drove up to Malacca for a couple of days because it was a long weekend, and I just left it on in the kitchen, and I came back later and I tasted it. It didn't taste very good, but it tasted like beer, right? Not
Right.
well-made
Right.
beer, but it
But
has a beer
still,
taste, right?
no. I when I first did home brewing as well, like there's that moment where it's not great, but is it drinkable? If it's drinkable, I feel like I feel
Exactly,
that a
right?
sense of
Yeah.
achievement, right? Yeah.
And I'm sure we all have friends who will drink it for free, right? It's like, hey, I've got free
Yeah,
beers,
for
okay, I'll go
sure.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought to myself, like, considering I didn't put any effort in this at all, and it still turned out like all right. So I thought, okay, let me give it one more try and see whether if it improves, right? And I put a lot more work into the second one, and it turned out much better. And I thought, okay, let's really do this. So right after that, I went straight into all grain. Right, my third one, I bought all grain kits. I went to back in those days, you don't have nice grain fathers or like Braumeisters made for home brewing, right? So I had to go to like a commercial kitchen shop in Chinatown and bought like big ass
Oh
stock
man.
pots. Yeah, I brought it back to my secondary school and used the D&T lab, use the bench drill and drill some holes and DIY the whole system together.
True
Yeah,
garage home brewing.
yeah, exactly right. And that was when there were small pumps made for home brewing, right? So it was I looking back, like I can't imagine myself, having to carry 30 liters of wort that was like 70, 80 degrees from the ground to the stove top. Oh man, like it could get really nasty. Yeah. But it was fun, right? And then I started brewing like a madman, right? Like every week or every other week I was brewing, and I was really looking forward to it because like being in a pressure cooker like Singapore, right, where you're working like crazy Monday
Oh
to Fridays.
yeah,
I
definitely.
was I was I was always looking forward to the weekend where I was brewing because that to me was an escape, very therapeutic, right? So then I began to brew a lot and keep tweaking my recipes and then it came to a point where okay the beers got better, but we didn't have a lot of imports there, right? So I didn't know whether is this beer supposed to taste like the way it is, right? Like kind of like imagine if you are from US or wherever and you've not eaten char kway teow before, but you bought a cookbook, you can cook it a million times, but if you have not tasted the real thing here, you wouldn't know, is it supposed to taste the way it is, right? So then I started, and then there was iBrew Challenge, right? Which is coming up
Right.
next week in
Yeah,
Singapore.
yeah, it's coming. It's coming up, right? I thought I would
Yeah,
love to be there for it. I can't join, unfortunately, but I hope that's cool. But yeah, it's what it was the iBrew challenge part of you kind of
that's right.
was
That's
was
right.
that moment? I mean, was that the moment when you went? Because obviously you had that eureka moment in Cornwall. You then came back and got into this like this therapy, home brewing therapy. What was the moment where it went kind of you went? I could actually transition into this as a business? Like, was it when you compared what you're making at home to imports? Was it during the homebrew? I mean, was there a switch, or was it more like an evolution when you said, okay, this can be more than a hobby. This can actually be a business. What was that point?
Actually, on the contrary, it was, like because when you're homebrewing and I was brewing so much, right? So within legal means, within the legal limits, I
Within the
could
legal limits as prescribed
qualify
by the
that.
Singaporean government. Yeah, 20
Yeah,
liters. I think it's 20 liters a month, right? Isn't it? Is that
30
the
liters a month.
oh,
Yeah,
30
30
liters a
liters
month?
a month.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And not for
So,
commercial sale. Absolutely not.
so I got a lot of my mates over, right? And, we just, like crush through the beers, watch a game of football or play PlayStation in back in the day, right? And like friends would come and drink for free and they say, hey, you know what, John, this is good. We will pay for it. Obviously they will say they'll pay for it when it's free. Right? It's good, it's better than all the beers out there that we are paying for. People would pay for this and that went on for many years, right? And then like I said, I entered beers to home iBrew challenge. Initially I was just trying to get constructive feedback, right? Like how to improve the beers and everything, right? From the beer judges and all. And I was surprised that actually I won some medals, right? Then it got me started thinking, right? But then at the same time, I was in a pretty comfortable job before, so I didn't want to like risk it all. And at the same time, it's like I wouldn't want to take my hobby and then make it work and stress and what, right? So it was very much to me as a hobby, and I intended still to keep it as a hobby, right? And I actually resisted it for many years, like considering I was brewing since '08 and Brewlander only was incorporated in 2016. That was 8 years, right? And there were a few factors, right? Number one is I didn't want to make it uh, a business, right? And take the joy
No,
out of
fair
it,
enough.
but potentially take,
Totally. That makes
yeah,
sense,
take
right?
the,
Because it can sometimes money in business can poison something that's beautiful and fun, right?
yeah, that's right. And then the next thing as well was always like, I want to make sure that if ever I was going to do it, I want to make sure that I was ready, right? That I was ready to transition from brewing in my kitchen to going to a commercial brewery to brew it. And likewise, I didn't want to just pass a recipe to someone and the guy makes the beer for me. I want to be able to go in there and really drive it myself, right? So then I can say it's my beer, right? And it took that long, I guess, like for me to feel like, okay, I think I'm ready, right? So in 2016, I was making some career speeches. So I left my previous company and I thought, okay, I was 34 then. And I thought like, okay, if I don't do it now, I probably don't want to do it when I'm 40. Um, because at 40, with kids and and being more comfortable in life, and I'm not sure whether I want to take that kind of risk when I'm 40, right? And energy as well, right? So I thought, okay, let's give this a go, and and it almost like kind of is started like having a laugh with some friends as well, and say, oh, okay, let's do this, and say, oh, okay, let's be part of this, and we put together a small sum of money, and yeah, and we got started brewing.
That's awesome. I mean, I know it's so cool to hear that story, and I mean, it's such an interesting journey, like starting from that pint in Cornwall all the way to kind of becoming this craft beer, this homebrew plus scale in Singapore. I mean, what was out of curiosity, what was the story? Because I'm also looking at your background as you're talking this Brewlander, and I'm just thinking, where did the Brewlander name come from? What was that? Did that come during the process? What's the story behind Brewlander, the name?
Yeah, it's I wish that there was a very sexy and interesting story behind that, but sadly I got a disappointment here. Like, okay, so the long story short was that I used to store all my recipes and everything on my laptop, right? And then the laptop crashed, and I was like, all my notes and everything was gone. So I thought, okay, let's move this to the web, right? And make a blog out of this, right? So the blog is more like a journal for myself. And if anyone wants to just be involved and see that whole craft beer or my homebrew journey, right, it's more than welcome to look through my homebrew blog or journal of sorts, right? And obviously, I like doing it under the radar, right? Because I don't like to go out there as, oh, I'm John, hey, blah blah blah, right? So I thought, hey, let's name it, let's find a name for it. I was like deliberating for weeks, like what to name it, right? And then right after watching Zoolander, which I absolutely love, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it kind of fits in with the hobby, right? Because like in Singapore, right, everyone takes themselves far too seriously, right? And and the hobby as well, right? Some homebrewers are like so competitive, right? And I was like, come on, it's only beer, it's like just beer, right? If it doesn't taste well, brew it again, right? And I love the whole making fun of yourself in Zoolander, right? Like it's so funny and like just
Such a funny movie. Yeah.
funny show, right? Like and I thought, okay, yeah, Zoolander, Brewlander, okay, and that's how it happened.
Amazing. I did
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
I know I love the honesty and transparency, and I actually think that's amazing that it came from Zoolander. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's going to be the headline of the blog of
And
the podcast, from Zoolander to Brewlander.
yeah, and that's the whole my approach to the hobby as well, right? Like, just brew the beers, friends come over, and at some point, right, very quickly, it's no longer about the beer, but hanging out with your mates and like, you know, dick around. Am I allowed to say that? Well, like just mess around and have a good old fashioned fun, right? And the beer is more a social lubricant and get mates around and just everyone bond over it, right? Yeah. And
Yeah, it's
that's how
important. It's
Zoolander
so
came
important.
about.
Zoolander,
Or
Brewlander.
Brewlander came
Yeah,
about. Yeah.
Brewlander. No, that's God. I love it. I love that. I love
Anyway,
the.
it was funny because I started the Brewlander moniker like many years before actually having Brewlander as a commercial
Oh, right,
brewery,
as the
right,
blog,
or brand, right? Yeah,
as the kind of online persona
that's
sort of
right.
thing.
Yeah. So when we go for homebrew meetups, gatherings, or like even at iBrew, I'll be like talking to people and introducing myself. Oh, I'm John, and like chit chat, chit chat. Then at some point, someone will say, "That's Brewlander." Then everyone say, "Oh, you're the Brewlander guy, right?" So no one knew me as John or John Wei. Everyone knew me as or knew Brewlander. So they didn't know this phase, right? And that was nice because I really enjoyed that. So then, when eventually I had to make the jump to commercial brewing, it was like I didn't have to make a choice, right? Even before that, everyone was like for years, right? So when are you gonna start Brewlander? When are you gonna start Brewlander? So when we're gonna do it, right? It almost felt like a natural thing to do because there was already that small little following. When I say following, maybe like 20 people or something. Yeah, but people, the people in the scene already knew that. And locally, like some of the bar owners who were also very much in the craft beer and home brewing scene, right, which was very, very small but very tight back then, right? They already knew about me and my home brewing project known as Brewlander. So it kind of felt like we didn't really start from zero, right? But maybe 0.5 or 1.
I think that transition from you homebrewing to hitting that certain inflection point. You started you were brewing in Cambodia, I understand. Then you've actually built a brewery in Singapore, which is no mean feat, and it's a real achievement. I was kind of curious, right? Because we could do a whole podcast just on building a brewery in Singapore. But what would you say during that process of really building that brewery? What was your kind of what did you learn during that? What was the learning process, the favorite moment when obviously transitioning from contract brewing in another market, and I know obviously you're very hands on, but it's still contract brewing, right? You're using somebody else's facility to building your own facility. What did you learn during that process? What were some of the favorite moments, both, I mean, mostly positive, maybe learning moments during that brewery process from zero to hero?
So it's interesting, right? Like again, like you said, I was very much home brewing, and like I started home brewing from when it was really really like ancient, right? In a sense, right? My homebrew setup was like cooler boxes, DIY, Frankenstein, pimp as much, is like really really, like really really nothing to shout about, and but through that, right, there's so many versions of my homebrew setup, upgrading and buying hoses and everything, right? So I was very much involved from the start of, okay, how do I improve my system even at home, right? How do I improve my system? Where can I put pumps? What can I do differently? How can I cool faster? How can I Do I have enough juice for the boil, or am I boiling too hard? And how does it? So I was really very much involved in that, and I'm pretty geeky on that front, right? So, back in the day, I always think about, oh, if I'm gonna have my own um a brewery one day, how would it look like? How would it feel, right? And I've always been thinking of designing brew houses, and then obviously I go for a lot of brewery tours, even as a fan, right? I travel overseas, I visit a brewery, you know, chances are I know someone who knows the brewer or whatever, right? And then they will give me a private tour, and I'll look at brew decks, and I'll look at systems, and we'll discuss and talk about all this and that and that and this. And my mind on the back of my head, right? I'm always thinking of, oh, okay, how can I improve this? What do I want? And this and that, right? So when it came to building the brewery in Singapore, or the brew house, I kind of already have a very very clear idea of what I wanted, right? And we have a fantastic partner in China that was very flexible in helping us design what we wanted, right? And it was great. We went to someone that workmanship was, in my opinion, super, right? Like super. The wells are amazing. The after sales is great. But they were probably in a place where they only knew how to make traditional German brew houses, right? And they wanted to get into craft beer. So they were willing to work with me to design my brew because they wanted to learn, right? And then obviously they want to learn a thing or two, and then probably learn, I wouldn't want to say steal, but learn some ideas, and then, sell it to other people as well, right? In that sense, right? And they gave us a sweetheart deal, and all, and even up to today, we are always talking, and they are always supporting us. And we designed a brew house that, if you've seen it, right, it's pretty kick-ass, right? Like it does most of the heavy lifting for us, right? And our brewers really are more like supervising the brewing, right? And then they walk away to do some other stuff that's needed in the brewery. And we've got a lot of things involved there that could help us, because one of the earliest thing I learned, well, when scaling up my recipe from 20 liters to 3,000 liters, was that not everything scale
Right. Yeah.
linear, right? It's not linear. It's not like, oh, let me just times 10 or times 20. there are a lot of other things to consider, and I think one of the most important thing was hop utilization, right? Beers come in a lot more bitter, uh, you know, um, and there are so many factors, right? But for, I mean, the easiest to understand is that, chilling 20 liters of wood versus, 3,500 liters of wood, it takes a different amount of time, right? And the isomerization, utilization of alpha acids happens on a different scale altogether. So beers were coming in a lot more bitter, and then we compensate. We design our brew house to help mitigate that, right? In a sense that we are still able to use large charge of late hops if we want to, without making a beer too bitter. And I won't bore you with the details here. But then I kind of already have this idea of what I want my brew house to look like, right? And then it's working with people who can make it a reality. Everyone asked me, since embarking on that plan to build a brewery in Singapore, everyone asked me, even up to today, like, what why do you want to set up a brewery in Singapore? Like, everyone thought that there was a magic plan behind that. Or I cracked the code. Like, why would you want to set up a brewery in possibly the most expensive place to build
Yeah, it does sound
a
quite mad.
manufacturing facility and operate, not just building, but operate, because wages are high here, right? And it's like, why would you want to do it in Singapore? What's the secret? Or and I tell them I'm still asking myself the same question to today.
It's still a work in progress. No, but I do think, what you said, the kind of the two lessons, are really interesting, right? And I mean, two really interesting lessons that, number one, that, working with the right partners who are aligned with you. And sometimes the alignment, as you said, the alignment's doesn't necessarily sound perfect when you say, they're trying to learn how to switch from just building more German beer focused traditional brew houses to ones that are more oriented to craft brewers like yourself. But also the fact that you were able to it was a win-win for you guys and for them, right? They gave you a good deal. In return, you helped them learn and expand their market and, get a great case study, and they can learn. And I think that's something that's really sometimes undervalued, not just in the beer industry, but generally, right? Is when you find a partner, if you can get those win-win partnerships. I know it sounds cheesy, but if you can actually do it at a really solid business level, it's great, right? It can make a difficult situation, which, as we know, building a brewery in Singapore, I mean, I don't think I have to tell the audience, Singapore is not a manufacturing country really anymore. It's a high-tech hub, and the idea of building manufacturing businesses, which beer in a way fundamentally is, it's not easy to do, let alone regulation and processes. But the other thing that's interesting is about, oh, nice, Seabrew. Yeah. By the way, will we be seeing you at Brew Asia in Saigon? Will our end of this year?
We will be there. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah,
fantastic. But it's cool as well that I think it's a great lesson as well for people who are homebrewers who are listening to this, who are thinking about scaling up. It's interesting, hearing those stories about, scaling up isn't just a multiplier. It isn't just X10 money, X10 ingredients, the same process. There's a lot of testing and learning involved. I mean, on that, what would you say, during the business side, as you've been growing the business, expanding, I mean, you've been doing export, which is quite unusual in Southeast Asia, at least having continuity of export. I was in Thailand recently, saw a bit everywhere. In Koh Samui of all places. What would you say your favorite failure has been? And when I say failure, it doesn't have to be something that's disastrous. It can be a failure or something that maybe to the outside looks like a failure, since you've been kind of in this new phase of the business, as you've been building the brewery, as you've been expanding. What's a favorite failure that you think maybe has set you up for success? It's been maybe a painful lesson, something really challenging that's happened. It can be one thing, it can be two things.
Oh, yeah, I don't really have a major one that still sticks to me, right? Like, I don't dwell on these things often, and usually we just treat it as we got to deal with it and we move on.
Yeah.
Like, but I think, like, funny thing you spoke about earlier was about the branding of the whole Brewlander brand, and you spoke about Heart of Darkness as well, right? And I think that like like you said, like it might look like we have done a good job, right? But I tell you, that was I won't want to say biggest failings, but I would say that has always been our Achilles heel from day one, right? Like and I think it's a very important learning for a lot of people who are interested, right? And like my background was in finance, right? I have always been a finance guy, numbers guy. I was in stock trading actually for 8 years, right? And so I'm very sharp with numbers, very good with numbers. And then then brewing was my passion, right? So then I think that's why we kind of are still here today, because there's I'm able to adapt, wearing the two different hats between brewing and the beer, and being passionate about the beer, and coming out with recipes and everything, but at the same time also having the skill sets to run a business and look at things that are important, which is numbers, and being able to build a sustainable, viable business. But I am definitely not a marketing person. Definitely not right. So what you see today is like, I don't know, three, four different versions of the brand, and the rebrand, and the evolution of the brand, right? And I tell you, when we first started, we started with so little money, right? It's not that we had a low budget, it's that we had no budget to deal with agencies, designers, and everything. The first artwork of our beer and our labels was like done by my friend's girlfriend at that time, right? And I joked with him like, don't screw this up, right? Otherwise we won't be we won't have an artist after that. And obviously he did. Right? No, just jokes aside. Then after that we engaged somebody else to do a little bit of brand um uh, uh, refresher of sorts, right? But the guy did his best, but still, I didn't feel that there was still a disconnect between what you see as a brand versus, if you know me, and if you know the beers we are putting out, and if you read the website, what we're trying to describe about the personality of brand, it was still a mismatch, right? And it took us a long time to try to correct that. And I think up to today, I think we finally have got it closer to where we want it to be, and like you say, like Heart of Darkness, I think they do such a great job, right, of tying in the whole brand identity and being able to communicate that well, right? And I think that was has always been our challenge, and up to today, right, we're still trying to learn. And I would probably, fix is not the right word, and correct is not the right word, right? But we're
Yeah, it's like
trying to play
alignment
catch up.
almost.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right. We are
yeah.
trying to play catch up, and that has always been one of the biggest challenge. And up to today, we are paying for it, right? In a sense that we can't do too big rebrand, because we are like 5 years, 6 years old right now, and people already kind of recognize us a certain way and look a certain way, and we can't just suddenly, hey, and it's something that we have to live with, right? So and I think we've done a okay job trying to bridge these two disconnect better, and we'll get there, right? But as someone new, right, I think start already thinking about it, right? But again, I don't I think it's also half of it was just that I don't have the skill sets for that, right? And I'm not a
Most people
marketing
don't,
person.
but I think most people in beer don't, right? I mean, we've spoken about this before, that you can make the best beer in the world, you can have the best sales team in the world. That'll get you to
Mm.
point X. But if the brand value isn't high, if you don't have that brand value, I mean, forget just selling the beer. And as you said, I mean, people won't. I mean, you pay for it because people don't even recognize. They don't even, if your label's unclear, and people don't even
Yeah,
recognize it. That's a huge lost opportunity every time someone goes to a crowded shelf.
that's
Yeah,
right. That's right.
yeah.
So for us, it almost feels like the customer discovery, it's the other way around, right? I think a lot of times now in craft beer, it's like the labels look great, the brand looks great. I'm gonna pick it up and try it, right? Whereas for us, it's like back in the day, it was not so much that, right? It's more of, oh, some random dude picks it up, drink it, and it's like, oh my god, this beer tastes amazing, and then take notice about us. Or it's the other way around, word of mouth, people who know me, the brand story of homebrewer, first, like one of the earlier homebrewers that brew in his kitchen and then make it a Singaporean brand, or people in the industry start talking to each other. Hey, you gotta try this beer, it's very nice, right? And then the customer discovery was reversed in that order, right? So it was very funny. But I guess we make things difficult for ourselves. But I mean, I look at some of these things coming out of from the region, from Thailand, from it's so creative, right? Or even
Yeah,
in Hong
man.
Kong, in Taiwan, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
creative. And I felt that, I felt almost like, oh, that our journey would have been a lot easier if we have that figured out at the start, but like I said, it kind of started out like a laugh, like, oh, let's all put in a little bit of money and see how far it goes. We didn't expect to be here today, like in this level, right? And I got to pinch myself some days when I walk into the brewery and I was like, yeah, right. So I know this might be a bit unusual, but could you just let me just share something on
Yeah,
screen
go for it.
if you don't mind.
Absolutely. No, no, go for it.
And just all right. So I was sharing, right? This was my home brew
Oh,
setup.
wow.
Like, yeah. And then it's like, different versions, like carrying it up to the stove top. Then later, then yeah,
Man.
fermentation. And then later I invested in a pump, right? But this I have a page like really just documenting my homebrew
Cool.
setup, right? And then the start of the page was this like, oh, like, oh, this is my setup. Then, oh no, just joking, right? And this is actually my setup. And then like I've not visited this blog for so long until like preparing for this, right? And then I didn't realize that I had this photo there. And when I walked into the brewery today, it's like, wow, shit, this is like, when I posted about this, it was like it will never happen. It's like I it's like this is a dream, right? And finally, it's yeah, quite silly.
No, I love it, man. And very organic. It's a very organic journey. If I was summarizing it,
Yeah.
it's like and I think it's nice. It's great, not just for other people, in a similar position to you who are building their businesses in the beer industry, but also people who are starting out fresh or want to get into the industry. That it's not,
Yeah.
it just takes time and effort, right? And it's just organic, and I think things don't necessarily go perfectly the whole time, but it's just a matter of slowly building up and getting better and learning,
Mm.
testing and learning, whether it's with your beer, building a brewery, building your system, designing recipes, scaling them up, building your brand, building marketing. It's really great, John, to hear it's so cool to hear your story. And I just want to say, look, I'm really excited, just, it's really cool, just even when I travel around the region, seeing how far you guys are growing. I mean, I think to me, the next generation of Southeast Asian beer is sort of emerging right now, and I think you guys are very much part of that at a regional level, which I think is really, really exciting. And it's not just looking at it from an individual market, but that scale you guys have and the quality that you guys are delivering is awesome. So just wanted to say thanks for joining today, and it's been so cool hearing your story. And I know you and I could spend another hour chatting about everything from wine, and maybe later in the season we can talk about your wine odyssey in Tuscany. I'm sure if anyone, John's also a wine connoisseur, and someone who I can actually talk to about wine. I'm a complete newbie about it. But John, I just want to say thanks again for joining the session today. And mate, it's been a real pleasure having you on. I hope we can catch up for a beer in person soon. And in the meantime, what I'll do as well is I'll tag John when we post this up on YouTube and Facebook. I'll make sure John's tagged. So if you have any questions, if you want to learn more about Brewlander, we'll have links to Brewlander in the post and in the comments. And John, any last words for the ABN audience, for our ABN Talks audience to share?
Wow, last words. I mean, just keep it going, right? Like, brew great beers, right? And life's too short to drink bad beers. So,
Amen to that.
keep the hobby going, keep the passion going. Right. I think like what Ollie said, I think we are at a very interesting times for craft beer in Southeast Asia at this moment, right? And I think that's great. That's great.
All right, John, much appreciated for joining us. Cheers. And to everyone, we'll see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to season 2, episode 3 of ABN Talks. All right, thanks everybody.